Mae'r stafell wastad yn tawelu ar yr amser cywir dwi'n gweld. The room always goes quiet at the right time, appropriately. We're beginning the talk and we have people joining us online with the Zoom. Felly croeso cynnes i chi gyd, a very warm welcome. Croeso i chi i'r drwm yma yn y Llyfrgell Genedlaethol ac i bawb sydd yn ymuno ar-lein. To everybody joining us online, a very warm welcome. I'm Murray Lloyd Morgan and I'm Chief Executive of the National Library. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. Yesterday, I was telling Murray, I was at the national conference of the Welsh Federation of Women's Institutes, and the Great Hall in Aberystwyth Arts Centre was quite full, and I wasn't scared at all of that audience. No, I was fine. It went okay, I'm told, but this I feel is a different audience and here for a serious and detailed look at our topic today, which I'm certain we will enjoy. A word about our speaker. Murray is a veritable man of the marches, I feel, from having got to know Murray a little over the past couple of years. Brought up near Welshpool and attending Buttington Trewern Primary School and Welshpool Grammar and graduating in civil engineering at Loughborough University and thereafter qualifying as a chartered engineer and becoming a fellow of the Institution of Civil Engineers. Murray has had a career that's taken him across the globe, working in Europe, the Middle East and the Americas in areas including design and construction in health, education and defence. For 19 years, Murray worked as chief engineer responsible for the dock facilities at the naval base at Devonport, Plymouth, home of the Royal Navy's nuclear submarine fleet. Later, Murray worked on decommissioning nuclear research reactors at Dounreay on the north coast of Scotland. Now, retirement, if it can be described as that, has given Murray the opportunity to develop further interests, particularly in local history. And I'll introduce this bit, I'll limit this bit of the introduction to that. Murray has pursued his hobby of researching local history. He became chairman of the Powis Land Club, the Montgomeryshire County History Society, and contributed many articles to its annual journal, the Montgomeryshire Collections. One of his other more substantial pieces of work was the preparation of 9 volumes, listing in detail the Montgomeryshire Court of Great Sessions jail files, which covered the periods 1541 to 1620 and 1650 to 1660, and in total, some 26,863 entries detailing all the documents relating to criminal proceedings. A vast piece of work. And 4 of these volumes were published by the National Library of Wales, I'm pleased to say. And he's also published 3 volumes recording each and every property transaction within the county of Montgomery for the period 1541 to 1830, some 8,540 entries. Finally, Murray undertook the mammoth task of preparing a history of the Powis Castle estates in the early modern period. And I'm very pleased to see Jonathan here as chair of Powis Castle Estates. And he has drawn, obviously, on the estate's records that he had listed and housed here at the National Library of Wales and those held in the National Archives queue. I was just over in the reading room a little while ago. Murray's work fills an entire shelf in the reading room. It's just an enormous body of work that he has contributed. So I just wanted to say, Murray, you have made and are continuing to make an extraordinary contribution to these areas of history and to enriching the wealth of archives here at the library, and now made far more accessible thanks to your hard work and dedication. And your support and generosity to the library is also greatly appreciated. Please give a warm welcome to our speaker, Murray Chapman.
Thank you very much for that fine introduction. One thing I should mention as well, for very many years, I was a trustee of the Powis Castle estate. So I have got quite an embedded interest in the welfare of this estate, and it was through that my interest developed in writing a history of the Barony of Powis. Now, my talk today is about the Great Welsh Land Case. It's not a title I selected. It was selected for me. It was a title given by the Privy Council and was initiated as a result of Sir Edward Herbert, who was then the Lord of the Barony of Powis, very shortly after he acquired the barony in 1587. It was a significant case as it established his right over the common and waste lands within each of the townships within the Barony of Powis. Now, the Barony of Powis, as you can see, it is shown here in this top part. At one time, of course, the Barony of Powis extended over what was the county of Montgomery. But it then got divided as a result of there being two co-heiresses, and one half went to one co-heiress, Cyfeiliog, Arwysli and Iddo. The other half went to the barony as we now know it. These other areas here, Halsiter, Cadwyn and Kerry, were taken by conquest by the Mortimers. So the barony I'm going to be talking about is as shown there in yellow. The Privy Council, when this matter was put before them, ultimately referred it to the Council in the Marches of Wales. The reason being it went to the Council in the Marches of Wales, they were in effect the equivalent Privy Council for Wales and the Marches. And also, their judgment would then be used by all the judges who went their circuits on the Great Sessions. It would have set a precedent, and we're very fortunate that the judgment has survived. It came to light when I was involved in listing the Powis Castle archive here. The status and the rights in common land was a very emotive issue, and it did result in some internecine fighting between three of the major families within the Barony of Powis. The Herberts of Montgomery, who were stewards for Sir Edward Herbert of Powis Castle, and the Price family of the Hall Llanfachlin, and there was then the Vaughan family of Wedi'i. And on every occasion, they came into conflict. The Vaughans of Wedi'i had, prior to the Great Welsh Land Case, benefited from enclosing large tracts of common land. So what was the situation before Sir Edward Herbert acquired the Barony of Powis? When Sir Edward first entered into the possession of the Barony of Powis in 1578, he found himself having to assist Edward Grey, the then owner of the barony, against claims to its ownership by members of the Vernon family. The Vernon family were from Haddon Hall in Derbyshire, an extremely wealthy family. But members of that family had settled in Shropshire, one of them at Stokesay Castle, the other at Hodnet. Sir Edward was also aware from the survey of the Barony of Powis carried out by Edward Grey in 1575 that there were issues and contentions over the enclosure of common land by the freeholders in each township. When he took a lease of the barony, all the waste and common lands were specifically excluded out of it. Sir Edward also became aware and challenged the ownership of certain abbey lands within the manor of Ymunwch and Mechynwch, and I'll explain that a little later, which the Vaughan family of Llywediaeth claimed were part of their manor of Talerddeg. These matters were to occupy Sir Edward Herbert for the rest of his life, up to the day of his death on the 23rd of March 1595. To put into context the origins of the Great Welsh Land Case, I need to provide some background information for which there were two significant events. Firstly, the re-emergence of the Llywediaeth estate of the Vaughan family, and secondly, a survey of the barony which was undertaken by Edward Grey in 1575. So, turning to the first of these, the Llywediaeth estate. Now, I've shown on here a family tree of the Vaughan family of Llywediaeth, and we're going to be talking about certain individuals in here who created a great deal of contention with the Herbert family. The Llywediaeth estate re-emerged when John ap Hywel Vaughan, and he's up here, returned to Llywediaeth in 1536. Some years before then, his father, Hywel Vaughan, who sometimes lived at Llywediaeth, did a voyage from Llywediaeth to the county of Barwniaeth for the killing of one, Ieuan Tig, where he and his son and heir continued there for diverse years. In their absence, the buildings of Llywediaeth were burnt and destroyed by certain of the friends of Ieuan Tig. The fences and enclosures became decayed, and the grounds of Llywediaeth became wild and without manure. So, in 1536, a view or comanfa was procured by John ap Hywel Vaughan of the meres of his lands in Llywediaeth and Cefn and in certain other places in Powis, which were the lands of his ancestors. A jury of freeholders was sworn to walk the meets and the bounds, and the jurors after view found that all the lands within the two townships of Llywediaeth and Cefn were the inheritance of John ap Hywel Vaughan and his ancestors. At the time of the view of the lands by the jury, several parcels of ground lay open, and John ap Hywel Vaughan in his lifetime, and after him his son Owen ap John, and after him his son in his lifetime, after him had severally enclosed and drawn into severalty diverse parcels of grounds at the time of the said view lying open in the township of Llywediaeth. It's really important to understand this, because all the troubles that emanate and the clashing and the internecine fighting which did occur finds its origins here. The next item or background was the survey of the barony. Edward Grey was, by the advice of his near and discreet friends, persuaded to undertake a survey of his lands in order to sever his own domains, forests and parks from the freeholders and farmers of his tenements, and utterly extinguish and avoid the grounds and occasions of great trouble that oftentimes heretofore have happened between the lord and tenants. It is likely that one of his near and discreet friends was Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, for Edward Grey, during his youth, was a servant and an attendant upon the Earl. Another of Edward Grey's near and discreet friends was probably Edward Herbert of Montgomery, who was his chief steward of the barony, and who was also involved in administering the Earl of Leicester's manors of Arwyddocaol and Cyfeiliog. Edward Grey appointed Sir John Throckmorton the Chief Justice of Chester, and diverse other persons of apparently great worthiness and credit, his commissioners to undertake a survey of the Barony of Powis in order to sever his own domain lands from those of the tenants. The appointed commissioners proceeded with the survey until the 22nd of August, 1575, when they came to Mathravel. Mathravel was also known as Caranion, and it was the ancient chief site of the Lordship of Powis, where the survey was disrupted by members of the Vaughan family of Wedi'i. In his bill of complaint to the Court of Star Chamber in November 1575, Edward Grey said that John Owen Vaughan of Wedi'i, although being appointed one of the commissioners to undertake the survey, together with his brother Howell Vaughan, they put in exercise what possible devices and drift they might to the let and hindrance of the survey, because John Vaughan and others his tenants within the Lordship of Powis had made of late time great enclosures out of the wastes which belonged to Edward Grey. Their intent was by all means to bring to pass their desired purpose by indirect and subornation of simple people to hold and keep the wrongful enclosures. Now, I want to talk about the manor of Ymunwch, but just to show you where this lies, Ymunwch, as you see, is here. It's a monastic manor. And it is, in fact, where the Abbey of Strata Marcella was located. So, significantly, the survey of the Barony of Powis in 1575 was shortly after Sir Rowland Hayward experienced a great deal of disruption when he tried to enclose part of the common called Gwernfelly in his manor of Ymunwch. And there's Gwernfelly and Goelygoed. These were common land. And this common land was shared by the adjacent township of Rhydescyn and also the adjacent manor of Ystrad Marchel, Bagedin and Farwniaeth in particular. There, the objectors dressed up in women's clothing and filled in the ditches which had been dug under the orders of Sir Rowland Hayward. The survey of the Barony of Powis may also have been initiated after Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, who had undertaken a survey in 1573, some 2 years earlier, of his manors of Arwyddocaol and Cyfeiliog, which had been granted to him by the Crown in 1572, and this may have served as a model for Edward Grey's survey. The record of the survey undertaken in 1575 of the Barony of Powis for Edward Grey has not survived, but 4 writs, dated the 12th of August 1575, issued out of the Montgomeryshire Court of Great Sessions, required 124 persons named in the writs, justly and without delay, to pay to Edward Grey certain sums of money. Let's see if we can show this one. And this is a table showing the number of people and the amounts that were to be paid. There is nothing surviving in the records of the Great Sessions to indicate what these payments were for. It just simply said it was money owing. Now, the date is very coincidental with the survey, and it may be that the survey identified lands for which rent was in arrears, or it was for unlawful enclosure of common land. In other words, it was being granted to those who enclosed by way of a lease and therefore having to pay some form of rent. The amount owing by each person stated was to be 40 shillings, of which 118 people were assessed to owe 40 shillings. There were 5 persons who were assessed to owe £4, and there was 1 person who was assessed to owe £5. But I don't know the truth of the matter, but it is coincident. And I know similar charges were laid to various tenants in arwyddocaol and cyfeiliog when the survey was carried out by the Earl of Leicester to determine, well, what was the extent of common land. So let's now look at Sir Edward Herbert. There's a family tree of the Herbert family, but please note one thing. Oops, let's go back. Pressed the wrong button. So here's the Herbert family of Pembroke, and there is Sir Edward Herbert, who acquired Barony of Powis. But look, John Grey, one of the previous lords of Powis, had married a Herbert, Anne Herbert. So what you see is there was a close relationship between the Grey family of Powis and also the Herbert family who came in to the county. So it was probably through this close association of the Herberts with the Grey family, and also the Grey family with the Throckmorton family, because Edward Grey had married the niece of Sir John Throckmorton, that Sir Edward Herbert of Hendon, County Middlesex, became interested in taking possession of the Barony of Powis. Sir Edward was a second cousin to Sir Edward Grey and to John Herbert, and had married Jane Orwell, the mother of Sir Edward Grey's illegitimate son, Edward. This is why there was a big dispute over the ownership of the barony, because being an illegitimate son, he could not inherit. And that actually remained the case until the Law Property Act 1926. But to get round that, Sir Edward Herbert set up special arrangements to put all his estate in trust for the benefit of his illegitimate son and then for his heirs thereafter. Indeed, it appears that by an agreement entered into on the 20th of August 1578 between Sir Edward Herbert and Edward Grey of Barwniaeth, there was an intention for one of Sir Edward Herbert's daughters to marry the son and heir of Edward Grey when he achieved his lawful age of consent, which of course in those days was 14 years. As part of that agreement, Sir Edward Herbert took possession of the Barony of Powis on the 1st of November 1578 by way of a lease for a term of 15 years. Amongst other requirements, the agreement was to ensure that the use relating to the Barony of Powis and all other manors and lands in Shropshire and elsewhere in England be preserved and continued to the lawful use of Edward Grey. Sir Edward Herbert paid Edward Grey of Barwniaeth 2,000 marks in consideration that Sir Edward Herbert is not only contented to take upon him the good virtuous government, education and bringing up of such son of Edward Grey as now is, and hereafter shall happen to be heir apparent of the said Edward Grey. The survey of the barony by Edward Grey identified encroached lands, escheated lands, bond lands and forfeited lands within the lordships or manors in the county of Montgomery, which the tenants and occupiers claimed to be their freehold and inheritance. Let me emphasise again that the occupiers in each township, the freeholders, claimed that they held the freehold and inheritance of the common land. We'll come back to that because it's the important point. And pretended that Edward Grey had no right or title to them whatsoever, but only as chief lord of whom the same were held. The disputed ownership of these encroached lands within the Barony of Powis, known as Kittir, which the freeholders of each township used in common and claimed to be their freehold, was, as I have noted, specifically excluded out of Edward Grey's lease of the Barony of Powis to Sir Edward Herbert in 1578. In particular, the deed of conveyance stated that, and I'm going to quote now what was put in there, shall not be taken, deemed or judged to contain or extend unto any encroached lands, escheated lands, bond lands or forfeited lands within the manors within the Barony of Powis. The exclusion of encroached and escheated bond and forfeited lands out of the conveyance of the Barony of Powis to Sir Edward Herbert is significant. Doubts must have existed as to whether or not such lands could be conveyed. So, Sir Edward Herbert, despite the ongoing litigation with the Vernons over who actually owned the Barony of Powis and the uncertainty it undoubtedly created, made a commitment to acquire the Barony of Powis. So, by an indenture dated the 28th of February 1582, Edward Grey and Grisogyn, his wife, stated that they were minded to bargain and sell the Barony of Powis to Sir Edward Herbert, noting that a decision by the son and heir of Edward Herbert on whether or not to marry one of the daughters of Sir Edward Grey could not be made until he was 14 years of age. At the time of making of the indenture, he was only 9 years old. In consideration of this agreement, Sir Edward Herbert paid to Edward Grey the sum of £8,250, but this was subject to a proviso that in the event Sir Edward Herbert being evicted out of the Barony of Powis due to the ongoing dispute over the ownership of the barony with the Vernon family, then Edward Grey was to repay the sum of £8,250 to Sir Edward Herbert, with all damages, costs that he had incurred. Sir Edward Herbert received the total income from the Barony of Powis from the time he took possession of it under the 15-year term commencing the 1st of November 1578. The income he received for the year ending Michaelmas 1582 amounted to £320, 12 shillings and sixpence, out of which he paid Edward Grey £100 a year's rent for the barony and £6 for charges in keeping the audit. And that shows where his income was derived from. When Edward, the son of Edward Grey, achieved 14 years of age, it is evident that he would not enter into a marriage with any of the daughters of Sir Edward Herbert. And so on the 27th of February 1587, being almost 5 years to the day from when the previous indenture was made, Edward Grey and Grisogyn, his wife, having previously obtained the licence of the Queen, conveyed the Barony of Powis to Sir Edward Herbert and his two sons, John and Edward. They were his two younger sons, not his eldest son, William. And it was to be held in a trust for him to decide later on who should actually possess the Barony of Powis. And this conveyance was for a competent sum of money. Unfortunately, that's all it says. To the use of John and Edward, the sons, as a gift of their father until such time that Sir Edward Herbert paid to one of them the sum of 10 shillings, after which the use would be to the nominee of Sir Edward, to Sir Edward Herbert. Sir Edward had previously paid sums of money amounting to at least £10,711, 9 shillings and 5 pence for what he had acquired so far. So let's move on to the Great Welsh Case. Shortly after Sir Edward had acquired the Barony of Powis in 1587, he commenced legal proceedings against those who he alleged had made unlawful enclosures of the common land. Those who had right of common regarded it as being inalienable and fiercely opposed any interference with it. It was regarded by the freeholders in each township with each manor as a necessary and economic part of their farming activities. This very emotive and contentious matter did result in many disputes. Indeed, it was a major reason for the Celts' rebellion, which created a national emergency to suppress it. On the 9th of July, 1549, Robert Kett of Norwich was elected the leader of the rebellion, which comprised some 16,000 armed men who camped on Mousehold Heath, and with this force took and held Norwich, then England's second city. The rebels had thrown down enclosures before they had established a camp at Mousehold Heath. There was a general muster in Wales, as well as in England, to raise troops to crush the rebellion. The King's Council, having issued directions on the 23rd of July to Sir William Herbert, who later was made Earl of Pembroke, as to raising troops and furnishing them with coats, weapons, and so on. Now, this looks a very busy slide, but it is the Barony of Powis. But at this time, there is one element which is not part of the barony, and here it is, Llanwddin, St John of Jerusalem. That actually was acquired by the Herbert family of Montgomery and was not a part of the Barony of Powis. And of course it was part of the, following the dissolution of the monasteries and so on. So that passed into private hands, into people who actually lived in Shropshire. But the map shows all the townships within the Barony of Powis. And those shaded green are those where enclosures have been made. So you can see there's been a tremendous amount of enclosure going on. The only areas where there has been very little in the way of enclosures is up here in Mochnant. It's so very hilly up there. Also some areas around here. But you'll see there's some cross-hatched areas, such as here at Garthbaibiel, here, which we've called Llanelwddyd, some other places here. And these are part of the manor of Llanelwddyd, or claim to be part of the manor of Llanelwddyd. And these were the areas challenged by Sir Edward Herbert, because he claimed they were actually within the boundary of his barony, and therefore those monastic lands and also the commons of those monastic lands belonged to him. They, of course, belonged to the Vaughans of Wedi'i. So immediately you can start to see why the Vaughans were getting quite upset with the Herberts. So these enclosures had occurred since about 1540. So during 1588 and 1589, the Privy Council gave consideration to what they labelled the Great Welsh Land Case, which had been initiated by Sir Edward Herbert, what he alleged were unlawful enclosures of common land. The dispute occurred following a time of great changes brought about by the dissolution of the monasteries and the passing of the Acts of Union, which, amongst other matters, largely abolished the ancient customs of land tenure and used hitherto in the Barony of Powis. Indeed, Clause 2 of the Act, for laws and justice to be administered in Wales in like form as it is in this realm, states that all person and persons inheritable to any manor, land, tenement, rents, reversions, services, or other hereditaments, which shall descend after the feast of All Saints, that is the 1st of November, next coming within the Principality, Country or Dominion of Wales, or within any particular lordship, part or parcel of the said Country or Dominion of Wales, shall forever after the said feast of the 1st of November inherit and be inheritable to the same manors, lands, rents, tenements, reversions and hereditaments after the English tenure, without any division or partition, and after the form of the law of this realm. In other words, gavelkind was abolished, and the land was to be inheritable by primogeniture, according to English law. However, Clause 35 set down a proviso. The lands, tenements and hereditaments lying in the said Country and Dominion of Wales, which have been used time out of mind by the laudable customs of the said country to be departable and amongst issues and heirs males shall still so continue and be used in like form, fashion, and condition as if this act had never been had nor made anything in this act to the contrary notwithstanding. So on the one hand it said it took away gavelkind, but then put this proviso in which said gavelkind could continue. So there appear to be contradictory provisions in clauses 2 and 35 over whether or not gavelkind was abolished or not. And this would have provided fertile ground for lawyers to argue over. They would have loved it. However, the provision of clause 35, which allowed gavelkind, was overthrown by clause 128 in an act passed in 1543, which established the Courts of Great Sessions in Wales. And that stated that all lands, tenants and hereditaments within the said Dominion of Wales shall descend to the heirs according to the course of the common law of the realm of England, according to the tenor and effect of this act, and not be used as gavelkind. So it specifically excluded it. So what is the substance of the Great Welsh Land Act? There are two main elements. The enclosure of the common lands, as you have already seen here, you can see there's a tremendous amount of common land being enclosed. Some of it was enclosed part-time, just for a few years, with agreement of the other freeholders, and then thrown open again. So the freeholders called the common land Cytir and claimed that they held it in coparsony, but which the Lord of Powis claimed belonged to him as the freeholder of the barony. So that's the first point. That's the first point of contention. The second, the enclosure of common lands lying within the lordships or manors of Carainian and Mechain. These are these areas here, which I picked up before. So there's Carainian and there's Mechain, which were claimed by the occupiers to be abbey lands and a part of the monastic manor or lordship of Talerdig, but which the Lord of Powis claimed were common lands within his Barony of Powis. So what is Cytir? There is a definition in the many witness statements relating to this case. Amongst them, John Price of Llanlligan, a gentleman aged 74 years, said that the freeholders of the Barony of Powis have, and time out of mind, had the like estate in the ground called Cytir within the Barony of Powis for their portions of the same Cytir as they have and had in their several tenements and lands within the townships where the Cytir lies, and that the same Cytir did and does belong to the ancient messuages and lands of the freeholders within the townships, and that he has heard and believes that the name of Cytir did first grow and had his name when the lands and tenements descended to heirs in coparsony by gavelkind or otherwise. And when the heirs made divisions thereof, they used to leave some portion to be used in common amongst themselves until they did make division thereof, and to be afterwards enclosed and divided at their pleasures. So this is the nub of the whole thing. So all the freeholders who had a right of common said a portion of that common actually belonged to them as their freehold. Whereas Sir Edward Grey said, no, the freehold belongs to me. You've only got a right of common of pasture. So the commencement of court action. Sir Edward commenced an action in Michaelmas term 1587 in the Court of Exchequer of Pleas, Westminster, against John Owen Vaughan, archwiliad, and Howell Vaughan, his brother, for encroaching and enclosing common land within his Barony of Powis. It's simply because they had enclosed so much. Now, the one thing to remember, Wedi'i had gone to become a waste ground. Well, he then had a survey carried out, through this commandva. And this is Wedi'i Township, which he claimed belonged to him. And here is Kevin Claysiog Township, which Vaughan also claimed belonged to him. So you can see it's a substantial area of ground, together with other areas within the county. So the action also included encroachments and enclosures of common land by the occupiers of what they believed were abbey lands within the manors of Ymunwch, Mochnant and Carainion, which they claimed to belong to them. Sir Edward alleged that some 4,000 acres of those abbey lands had been enclosed out of the several waste and common grounds in those manors, and which had been converted into arable land, meadow and pasture, worth to let per annum 1,000 marks, or £666, 16 shillings and fourpence. He also alleged that at least 200 cottages and houses had also been erected upon those lands. Shortly after, in 1588, Sir Edward commenced an action against 29 defendants before the council in the Marches of Wales for having encroached upon and enclosed common within the barony. All of the witnesses who gave evidence about the cytir, or common land, claim that the cytir belonged to the freeholders within each of the townships, within each of the manors, for them to use at their pleasures, subject to the agreement of all other freeholders of that township. In response to the action commenced before the council in the Marches of Wales, John Owen Vaughan petitioned the Lords of the Privy Council, requesting them to order Sir Edward to cease his action there, and also at the common law, where the matter was about to go for trial in Shropshire, on the grounds that the president of the council in the Marches of Wales was Sir Edward's brother. Of course, he was the Earl of Pembroke, his brother, and that for some indifferent trial to cause Sir Edward Herbert to have the same tried at the Exchequer Bar at Westminster and in the Court of Common Pleas. Before 4th of March 1588, and certainly by the 18th of June 1589, the Privy Council issued out various orders on the Great Welsh Land Case. They did take account of John Owen Vaughan's petition concerning the partiality of the President of the Council in the Marches of Wales, and directed John Owen Vaughan to observe the order issued out of the Exchequer Bar, which put Sir Edward Herbert into possession of the lands in dispute. But John Owen Vaughan obstinately and wilfully refused to yield possession to Sir Edward Herbert, and so he, Sir Edward, commenced a new action against Vaughan before the council in the Marches of Wales. He also agreed with John Owen Vaughan that the trial should proceed on certain parcels of land, and that the verdict of the jurors would apply to the residue of the lands in question. To have assembled all the witnesses and everything for each and every parcel land would have been huge and a great undertaking. So by just using a sample and saying whatever decision is made on that would apply elsewhere, solved the problem. Vaughan was again concerned that the council in the Marches of Wales may show partiality towards Sir Edward Herbert's cause, and so he once more referred the matter to the Privy Council. But they, on the 18th of June, by the special direction and appointment of the matter, was referred before Sir Richard Shuttleworth, Chief Justice of Chester, and those members of the Council of the Marches of Wales which had been nominated by the plaintiff and defendants. An exemplification of 151 witness statements survives of all that was submitted in there. It's a massive document and is spread over 70 large vellum sheets. I can understand why people never wanted to research it. It is a vast document. The council then met at Hereford on the 13th of November 1589. Arguments from both sides concerning the right title, interest and possession of parcels of land, houses and buildings being part and parcel of the waste grounds of Carainion and Ymunwch in the Barony of Powis were heard by the council. The council delivered its judgment that, and I'm going to quote here now, there falls out and appears sufficient cause, title and matter to and for the said council in the Marches of Wales to give order for and with the said complainant, that is Sir Edward Herbert. to recover the premises, and to settle and quiet him in possession thereof, in sort as it herein declared, until the said defendants or any of them, or any of their lessors, shall recover the same against the complainant or his assigns or undertenants by the common law. Well, in fact, nothing further happened. They never did that. The reason being, how can they actually prove title to that common land? No deeds actually specified these. The following table provides just a very small sample of how the judgment, there was a complete table drawn up. And as you can see, there were 3 entries I've shown there, but there were a further 19 entries. And the acreages involved, 2,788, most of which was awarded to Sir Edward Herbert. The judgment of the Court of Exchequer in an action of trespass against John Owen Vaughan and Howell Vaughan of the lands of Gwaenantyraira, Coed of Archwil, and Frith y Bryn Glace remained unaffected, which confirmed those lands to Sir Edward Herbert. The defendants were ordered to pay 40 shillings towards the complainant's costs. I think that was just a nominal sum, because the costs must have been enormous. The council in the Marches of Wales had allowed John Owen Vaughan and his brother Howell to make challenge to their judgment through the common law if they could show title to the property in dispute, which they were not able to do. So, from the judgment of the court, it is evident thereafter that the Lord of the Manor's authority over the common land was established in not allowing any enclosures without the Lord's consent, or in compounding with him for such enclosures the rights to estovers, such as the felling of trees and cutting of turfs. The most important right by the case was the ownership of the soil, the minerals in the Lord of Powis. The freehold of the Kittir ceased to be held in coparsony by the freeholders of each township, and instead acknowledged to be the freehold of the Lord of the Manor. Immediately following the judgment by the council in the Marches of Wales, Sir Edward enclosed 100 acres of the 550 acres of common land known as Coed of Archwil in the manor of Myrddin. This he did on the 10th of December 1589. But in the night time on the 22nd of July 1591, and I'm sure you know what I'm going to be saying next, the ditches and hedges of the enclosures were thrown down and burnt. The freeholders there didn't like it one bit. So Sir Edward commenced proceedings in the Montgomeryshire Court of Great Sessions. The indictment was very carefully worded and recites that Edward Herbert, Knight, Lord of the Manor of Myrddin, had a certain great waste called Coed of Archwil, lying and being in the said manor, containing 550 acres of pasture, that on the 10th of December, at Varfel, 100 acres of wasteland was enclosed, which he relinquished from the tenants of the manor as common pasture, and that they and their lawful heirs had sufficient common pasture in the rest of the waste for which they could enter and regress. And the said Edward Herbert enclosed the same with ditches and hedges. But that on the 22nd of July, 1591, in the night time, at Varfel, the greater part of the ditches and hedges were thrown down and burnt to the great damage of Sir Edward Herbert. The matter was heard before the Chief Justice of the Great Sessions, which was held at Welshpool on the 25th of October, where the jurors found the presentment to be true, but did not know who had perpetrated the offence. The indictment had not named the offenders, so the court was not able to proceed any further in this action. However, this was not an end to this dispute, for Sir Edward referred it to be considered before the council in the Marches of Wales. And so he and his 2 sons, John and Edward, commenced their suit against named individuals. On the 29th 9th of November 1591, the Council in the Marches of Wales, sitting at Hereford, considered the complaint of Sir Edward Herbert and noted that the defendant, who was named John Griffith ap Howell-Bedow, had breached the order of the 13th of November 1589, which had really brought to an end to the Great Welsh Land Case, in not permitting the plaintiffs to have their quiet possession, use and occupation of the lands and grounds called Coed of Archwil, containing by estimation 100 acres, upon which lands a messuage or cottage stood. The council stated that the defendants, by the depositions of the witness, have proved sufficient matter to convince them that the defendant, John Griffith ap Howell-Bedow, had breached the order, so that the said council, upon full hearing of the matter, conceived that the same defendant deserved punishment by fine and imprisonment. He was in fact imprisoned, and he was in fact fined, but because he was so poor, after a short time, they just let him go. Judge Blackstone, the late 18th century eminent judge, provides a succinct legal status of common land when he noted that by the Statute of Mertens, however, and other subsequent statutes, the lord of a manor may enclose so much of the wastes as he pleases for tillage and wood ground, provided he leaves common sufficient for such as are entitled thereto. This enclosure, when justifiable, is called in law approving, an ancient expression signifying the same as improving. The Lord has the sole interest in the soil, but the interest of the Lord and commoner in the common are looked upon in the law as mutual. They may both bring actions for damage done, either against strangers or each other, the Lord for the public injury, and each commoner for his private damage. Moving on now to the final element, the challenge by Sir Edward Herbert to Lerdig being a lordship. Let's just go back to this map here. So here we are, we're looking at these little areas here. And there is in fact one in Mochna, it's a very small area as well. Now, this is one of these areas. The area in pink was indeed abbey lands. The area not in pink, although part of this township, was claimed by Vaughan to be abbey lands. So, in 1589, Sir Edward commenced action against John Owen Vaughan and his brother Howell on the basis that Lerdig was not a manor. This was a standard ploy. They always denied such things existed or heirs existed, and that the common lands claimed to belong to the dissolved monastery of Stratamarcella were part of his manor of Corrainion and Mechynwch. Notwithstanding the judgment of the Council in the Marches of Wales of the 13th of November 1589, this action continued and ended up in the Court of Exchequer by an action brought by Sir Edward Herbert on the 10th of February 1590 by way of an information of intrusion against John Owen Vaughan of Wedi'i and 7 other defendants. He alleged that they had entered into 1,200 acres of land which formerly belonged to the Abbey of Stratamarcella. Finally, on Saturday the 16th of November 1594, the court ordered that the matter in dispute was to be heard in the Exchequer Chamber at the second sitting in Hilary term next. The hearing never took place because Sir Edward Herbert died on the 23rd of March 1595, prior to that sitting taking place, and the proceedings therefore became abated. There is no evidence that they were ever revived, and so the lands remained with John Owen Vaughan and his descendants. It is perhaps not surprising that Dame Mary Herbert, the widow of Sir Edward Herbert, in a letter dated the 8th of June 1593, written at the shop of her cousin, Mr. Thomas Herbert, in Cheapside, London, to her servant, Lawrence Johnson, in which she noted the obstinate course that many of Mr. Herbert's unloving tenants of Powis have taken lately against him. If you've got time, I just want to talk about some of the consequences very, very briefly. I mentioned earlier on internecine fighting. Who were involved in that? Well, on the 12th of February 1588, Thomas Price of Llanfyllin, he was the brother of Edward Price, the JP, and Edward Price, the JP, had married Catherine, the daughter of Edward Herbert of Montgomery. And Edward Herbert of Montgomery, of course, was the chief steward for Sir Edward Herbert of the Barony of Powis. And he was killed by William Vaughan in Llanfyllin. And William Vaughan was the brother of John Owen Vaughan. Again, you can see there was clashing going on here. It's quite a story, and it's too long for me to explain that long story. Then on the 28th of October 1588, this is probably quite more significant, there was an assault upon Richard Herbert at Llanerfel Church, and he succeeded his father, Edward Herbert, to become the chief steward of the Barony of Powis. And he was assaulted by John Lloyd Vower with a forest bill, which sliced off a part of his skull, which exposed his brain. Remarkably, he survived. So who was John Lloyd Vower? Let's go back a bit. There he is. He was an illegitimate son of Margaret, the wife of Owen ap John ap Howell Vaughan, and therefore, I suppose, a brother to John Owen Vaughan. He obviously was quite a nasty piece of work. But what was the effect of that? It really did rile the Herbert family, good and proper. And on the 6th of February, there was an assault made upon John Owen Vaughan whilst he stopped over in Shrewsbury on his way to London, and there was a riot there. He had to seek sanctuary in the house of his brother-in-law, David Lloyd Draper. There he is, David Lloyd Draper, the brother-in-law to John Owen Vaughan. The riot and the assault was initiated by Francis Newport of Highercall, Shropshire, a JP. He was the brother-in-law of Richard Herbert, because Richard Herbert had married his sister, Magdalene. How did Francis Newport know? Vaughan was on his way to London to actually argue his case in the Great Welsh Land Case. It was because Sir Edward Herbert of Powis Castle had written to him, advising him that John Owen Vaughan was going there. So you can see all the Herberts were gathering together, seeking revenge one against the other. But as JPs, they also used their office as JPs to do what they could against any of the adherents on either side. So, for example, we have Edward Price was trying to coerce people and to get them to say things which were allegedly done by John Owen Vaughan or his adherents, so as to pin as much and throw as much mud at each other as they possibly could. It really it's quite remarkable when you start going through the depositions in the Court of Great Sessions, what emerges from all of that. But perhaps the saddest thing of all is that on the 27th of September 1589, John Griffith John an ordinary person of lowly rank, he was accused of arson in burning the house of David ap Cadwaladr. On Saturday, the last day of the Great Sessions, John Griffith ap John was led to the gallows, and standing on the ladder with the halter about his neck, because in those days, to be hanged, all you did was lean a ladder against the bough of a tree. Up one ladder would go the hangman, up the other would go the person to be hanged. Noose around the neck, twist the ladder, and that was your hanging. It was as basic as that. But whilst he had the halter around his neck and standing on the ladder, he protested that he knew that he was presently to appear before the tribunal sent of God, where he was sure to receive a juster judgment than he received of men, and with vehemence of spirit averred that he hoped to be saved by the precious blood of Christ. He was not guilty of the offence for which he then was to suffer death, and thereupon often and sundry times called God to be witness to his innocence. And he published to all the people then present and witnesses of his death, that John Price, before whom he was by the said Edward Price brought to be examined and persuaded, and oftentimes moved to say and affirm that that John Owen Vaughan had procured him to burn the said house, and with all that, the said John proposed to save his life if he would so do, and if that, the said John Price did not so persuade with him, he often then wished that instead of heaven, where he hoped shortly to be, that his part and portion might be amongst the devils of hell, to be continually and forever tormented with hell, fire, and brimstone. And I think, on that note, I'll say thank you.
But we have had a real treat this lunchtime. Can I just ask you once again to thank our speaker, Murray Chapman. Diolch yn fawr.